Whether you're in a survival situation, you're backpacking, you're camping, knowing how to put up a solid shelter is a major advantage. And so in this video, I want to show you 5 tarp shelters that are really easy to make. All you need is some cordage, your tarp, and then I'm going to teach you one basic knot you can use for all of these tarp shelters. If you're interested in any of the gear I use in this video, there'll be links down below in the description section. And let's talk about why shelter matters, right? So where I live in New Hampshire, snow and rain, that's a big deal if you're out in the woods. So if I can put something up to keep the snow and rain off of me when there's inclement weather, that's going to be a huge advantage to help me stay alive and just enjoy my time in the woods. But if you're out west in Arizona or something like that, having some sort of shelter will also keep the sun off you. It can also keep you out of maybe some major windstorm that's kicking up around you. Beyond that, psychologically, having a home base to come back to, especially in a survival situation, is really helpful. You're like, okay, that's my home base. That's where I'm launching from. That's where I'm coming back to if I have to go out and go foraging or hunting or collecting water. That home base, it just frees up your mind and puts you in a different level of calm when things could be pretty dicey. So let's jump in and look at these 5 tarp shelters. As you're putting your shelter together, you want to keep 3 things in mind. And I always talk about up, down, and out, or up, down, and around. So look up, look overhead. Are there widow makers, big branches that if a windstorm comes, they could fall and hurt you or kill you? So check up to make sure there's nothing that's going to fall on you. If you're in a canyon, make sure that there aren't rocks that could fall and end up hurting you. So look up, then look down. What are you setting your shelter up on top of? Could there be a bee's nest? Could there be ants on the ground? Could there be a place that scorpions or snakes are going to come? So check on the ground around you, and then look around or look out as well. One time I set up a shelter right on a deer run. It wasn't dangerous to me, but it was pretty scary in the middle of the night when a deer comes walking through my camp and I hear these footsteps in the woods. I'm like, what is going on? So check around. Are you in a flood basin or a river basin where water could come tearing through? Check up, check down, check around, and then you could start setting up your shelter. So this tarp that I'm using is from a company called Arcturus. Right on the front, it says reflects heat, windproof, waterproof, emergency survival blanket, all purpose. This thing runs about 20 bucks on Amazon. Great product. It comes inside this little pouch, and then you take the tarp out to use it, obviously. Shelter number 1 is the A-frame. You can see where I've got the paracord over there hanging on that tree. That's one tree. And then this one over here that's got that green lichen growing on it, that's our second tree. Basically a line between the two is what we're gonna set up. Let me show you the one knot. It's called the Tot Line Hitch. All right, so here's my piece of paracord. I got about 4 feet off the ground. You can adjust this. Once you have this set up, you can adjust it up or down to wherever you want it. But we're gonna do a Tot Line Hitch, okay? And the phrase I use when I say to myself when I'm tying this is over, over, under, over, out. All right, over, over, under, over, out. And I just said that again and again and again until I memorized it. You got your shorter end and your longer end. Go around the tree, shorter end goes underneath. Then it goes over, pull it down so it's pretty snug. Over again, pretty snug. Now you got these 2 little loops right there. So it looks like, I would say it's like 2 little donuts, right? So that was over, over. Now with this end that's sticking out, you're gonna go under the part that's gonna go across to the other tree, back over again, through the loop, and out, and pull this tight. So now when it's all said and done, the top of it should be these 3 little donuts, a loop across, and then this extra end sticking out. Underneath, it's gonna look like this, okay? The great thing about this is you can adjust it tighter or looser, and it'll stay nice and tight. If you pull on this end, it's not gonna slide unless you do it like this. Once you master that knot, it's a really good knot to use in the woods. You can just use your standard like square knot or a knot you use to like tie your shoelaces and just do it a bunch of times to lock things in. But you can see I've got one end secured there and it's stretched out so it's nice and tight. One end secured there, stretched out, and then the extra cordage right there, I just looped it up and tied it off. And now I've got a straight line between these 2 trees. The next step is really easy now. Take your tarp, unfold it lengthwise, and you're basically gonna make an A-frame. Here's my tarp. I'm gonna put it out with the reflective side down so it'll keep heat in. If I wanna reflect heat out, I can put it up. And it'll also grab attention if somebody is looking for me, say flying by on an airplane, if I was lost in the woods. All right, so you can see my tarp is out. You can also see that it's about probably 3 feet, maybe 2 feet off the ground. There's a couple different options here. If I don't have any more paracord or stakes or anything like that, I could just lower the rope and then put 4 rocks on the corners, which I'll do right now. This first one is called the A-frame because obviously it looks like an A. You can see it's really low to the ground. This is great if you want to keep the heat in, right? A big open tarp shelter is going to let the heat out. This will keep the heat in. It's also going to allow you to lie down, but you're not going to do a lot of work inside this one. Here I am inside. As you can see, not a ton of room, but that's totally fine because this is the type of shelter I would build if I was just hunkering down to get out of the weather. Maybe it's just time to go to bed. I need to throw together a quick shelter. All I need is the tarp, that one line, and then 4 rocks, 1 on each corner, and I'm good to go. That's your A-frame. Tarp option number 2 is called the lean-to setup. We're gonna keep this same line setup. We're gonna raise it up a little bit. I'll show you a little trick to lock your tarp in. This one's gonna be much more open. It's gonna keep most of the weather off. If there is a lot of wind and rain blowing, probably wanna go with an A-frame, but this other option, it's more open. You can sit underneath there. If there's a little bit of a drizzle, you're pretty much good to go. All right, so with this one, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the grommets, which are the little holes that are in the tarp. We're gonna take this line, we're gonna pinch it a little bit, run some cordage up through it, stick a stick in, that'll lock it in place, and then we can lock down the backside. Take a look. So we're gonna loosen up the rope a little bit, still attached to the trees. Take a little bite of the rope, slide that bite through, and then put a stick through this. And then when we tighten that, that's gonna lock this in so the tarp will stay exactly where we want it to on the line. All right, same thing on this end. Little bite of rope. You get that little loop, you slide it through. And then we're going to put this stick through and that'll lock it in place. Like so. That's what that looks like. Now what you're gonna see is as I tighten up that rope, the tarp is gonna lock in place and then I can slide it to however high I want it to go. So we're gonna tighten up the hitch here. There's one end, and then I can pull this down and this will basically lock in the tarp so it's not gonna slide all over the place. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna adjust the height of the cordage. And again, I could just loosen up the Tot Line hitch, bring it up as high as I want, depending on how steep I want the back. Now that I've got it set at the right height, I'm just gonna stake down the back with 2 sticks, and that'll give me a nice lean-to setup. And here's the other corner. So the great thing about this kind of shelter is you can set up a fire out here. You can kind of work underneath the shelter. It's not so closed down. If you want a steeper angle, you can bring this down. If you want it to be higher, you can bring the angle up. And definitely if there's rain coming, you can tuck under here quite easily. And unless it's really, really blowing, you're gonna stay out of the moisture. This next one we're gonna do is called the envelope. It's a variation on this lean-to style. And you would set this up if you had a lot of moisture or wind coming from one particular direction. So I did some backpacking and camping out in Olympic National Forest. When I was out there on the ocean, all the wind was coming from one direction. So this type of setup that I'm about to show you with the envelope will set you up to be off the ground, keep you a little bit dry from the moisture on the ground, and also really block that wind and that rain that's coming at you. What we're gonna do for this one is drop that center line down, and then we're gonna take a little bit of the bottom part of the tarp and fold it in. And that way we can maybe lay on that at night, but also that'll keep any moisture from sneaking in because it will be a complete wrap around there. And the best way to lock that bottom part in is to get just a long log and to just basically put that log right along that back section as it folds, and then you're good to go. We're gonna drop this, bring it down quite a bit here, and then tighten it back up. Same thing on this side, loosen it up, drop it down, and then we're gonna tighten this back up here again. So as you can see here, I ran a log inside. So there's one end sticking out, it goes inside, and then there it is sticking out. And once you have that log in and the tarp is folded over like that, you're gonna adjust this line again, pull it up so this whole top section is nice and tight. If you look at it quickly, it just looks like the lean-to, but if you focus down there, you can see the log running all along and it's got the tarp folded underneath it. Now that will keep any rain from coming in the bottom section, and I'll show you here. When you look on the top, you can see any rain that falls, it can't get under there now because the tarp is blocking it. I also put a rock there and a rock down at the other end to lock that back log in. But again, this type of setup is great if you've got wind and rain coming from one particular direction. In this example, it would be coming this way. And so I would set this up to keep all that rain from hitting me on a consistent basis. Hey, real quick, as you probably noticed with that envelope, I didn't fold the tarp under really far because I wanted more over my head. If the tarp was much bigger, I could have a lot over my head and then a big section that I could fold under that I can then be lying on at night. But with a smaller tarp, I think the main thing is fold it under enough to make sure no rain gets in. These last two setups I'm going to show you are great if there's not a ton of precipitation in your area. So if you're going to have wind and rain and it's going to be coming down significantly, these are probably not ideal, but these are two setups that will keep a little bit of moisture or precipitation off you. It'll keep the sunlight off you and also give you more room to operate. This one's called the Rainfly. First thing you can see I did is that I moved that line way up. It's almost about 6 feet. So I'm about 6'2", which is a little bit below the level of my head. So nice and high, that line is going to go up pretty high like that. Next thing we did here is we threw the tarp over so it's evenly spaced end to end and evenly spaced right in the middle is where that line is running over top of it. You'll need a little bit of extra paracord for this one. So I put 4 pieces of paracord, one on each corner. So one on the back side, and then one here, and then one on the back side. So I've got 4 pieces of paracord, each tied down or tied into the grommet. Just to mix it up a little bit here, I wrapped the line around a rock instead of using a stake. So I'll use stakes on the back side and rocks on this side. But there's one piece of the line secure. There's the other piece on the far side. I'll add another variable in here, which is I'm using actual tent stakes. These are really light. Picked them up at Walmart. They're maybe like 99 cents each or something like that. Very cheap. But this will add another level of ease if I'm making a shelter. So that locks that in there. There's the last one all locked in. And now here's what it looks like. And the advantage again of this is there's a lot of space in there to operate. So I probably don't want to make a fire right underneath there, but I could make a fire outside a little bit. I could certainly cook. We could have a couple people operating and doing things inside under that area as opposed to the original A-frame, which was really low to the ground and basically just built for one person. So this setup it's pretty easy to do. Takes a little bit more cordage, but again, it gives you more space to operate. And again, we'll keep off some basic rain that may just be drizzling or falling down vertically. As long as the wind isn't blowing, you should be good to go. So there's your Rainfly. The last one I'm going to show to you, I call it the flat top because it's just a flat tarp. It gives you the most space to operate. It'll cover the most square footage as far as, if rain falls down, it gives you the most space to operate with no rain falling on you. Again, if the wind is blowing or the rain is coming in at an angle, this one's not going to work great, but it will keep the sun and, some basic drizzling off of you. The one thing you need for the flat top is 4 trees or 4 objects in 4 different corners that you could actually tie the tarp to. Check it out. There's one corner, there's corner number 2, corner number 3, and corner number 4. And right behind me, you can see why we call it the flat top. Just a tarp, all flattened out, spread out, gives you the most area to operate underneath it. 4 corners, all secured to a tree. I could put this up even higher if I wanted to, but certainly plenty of room to get around underneath here if I wanted to work on things, set up a sleeping bag, a cooking area maybe with a stove, I would say, not with a fire, but yeah, lots of room to operate under this setup. There you go, 5 tarp setup. If you want any of the supplies I used in this video, they're down in the description section. And if you want to see a video where I use a tarp as my shelter and do a full-fledged survival outing for 24 hours using a survival kit that I built, check out the link right here. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.